Okay, what's going on, everybody? We are here, we're live. I want to thank you all for joining me today. If you can see and hear me clearly, please drop a one in the live chat and then we can get today's stream started. And while I'm waiting for the ones to come into the live chat, if you haven't already, please hit the like button because that is the most important thing you can do for me on this channel. What it does is that it helps make sure that those who are subscribed to the channel will indeed get their notifications, and it also helps to push this video through the YouTube algorithm as well. Second, if you've been ghost watching this channel for some time now, or maybe you're new to the channel, please do me a favor and do yourself a favor by hitting the subscribe button as well as the bell notification next to the subscribe button so you can be notified whenever I release a new video. And lastly, please make sure you share this video out on your social media platforms as well to inform your family and friends of this content. And it also assists in pushing this video through the YouTube algorithm also. And with the introduction out of the way, let's now get into the information. Let's get into today's stream. So what I want to talk about today, what I want to discuss today, I want to head back to Chicago. You know, that is my specialty, covering all things migrant crisis happening in Chicago and all things, for the most part, happening with Brandon Johnson, almost all things happening with Brandon Johnson. But when it comes to the migrant crisis, oh yeah, I'm on his bumper over there. And I have to say this, right? I have to say this. I told you all. I told you. You saw the title of this stream. You saw the caption that was on the thumbnail. I told you. I told you that once the Bring Chicago Home initiative failed, Brandon Johnson would be right back running the city council, trying to get a vote to get more money, tens of millions of dollars to fund the migrant crisis. I told you all that the Bring Chicago Home initiative, and just as a brief review for those of you who don't know, in case you're new, but I'll go through it quick. The Bring Chicago Home initiative was an initiative that was going to place a tax on properties being sold for $1 million and up that would accumulate roughly around $100 million a year to house the homeless, right? But as I stated over and over again, that $100 million a year, Brandon Johnson was going to put towards housing the migrants and funding Biden's migrant crisis. And I said it over and over and over again. If Bring Chicago Home fails, and when it does, which it did, he will run right back to city council asking for more money. Because at the top of the year, he was playing tough. At the top of the year, he was bluffing just like I knew he was and like I told everybody he was. When the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, wanted him to put some more money down on a migrant crisis. I believe J.B. Pritzker put somewhere around 162 million down. The Cook County president, I believe it's called Cook County president, was going to put 70 million down, and Brandon Johnson was supposed to match that 70 million with his own 70 million. And he played tough and pretended like he wasn't going to do it. He said, I'm holding out on giving migrants more money. I'm not going to do that. But I told you he was full of it. I told you he was full of it. Now, what I want to do now is backtrack just a little bit, just so we can review what Brandon Johnson actually said during that time period back in February when he was bluffing, which is exactly what he was doing. He was bluffing. Let me pull this up very quickly for you guys, right? This article here is titled, Chicago Mayor Faces Questions About Migrants and ARPA Funds, ARPA being American Rescue Plan funds, right? American Rescue Plan, the money. So let's get into this very quickly because he's going to contradict everything that he stated here, right? So let's go over this very quick, and it's not going to take too long. So Brandon Johnson, we're going to state this. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson says the city will not be spending more federal C-19 relief funds on migrant care. Because remember, at the time, he had already spent $95 million of C-19 fund that the citizens of Chicago didn't even know was still lying around, right? Nobody knew that there were $500 million in C-19 funds still lying around until Brandon Johnson was forced to out himself because he used $95 million of the C-19 funds to fund the migrant crisis in Chicago. But the article continues to read, reporters questioned Johnson Thursday after state and county leaders announced plans to spend another $250 million on Biden's migrants. Johnson decided against committing another $70 million, saying the deal is not just about financial resources. He stood his ground and said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to just keep pouring money into Biden's migrant crisis. But he was full of it. He was bluffing. He was waiting on Bring Chicago Home to pass, and it didn't. It failed. So now here we are. But I digress. The mayor has proposed raising the city's real estate tax to address homelessness, while more than 70% of the city's Federal American Rescue Plan Act C-19 assistance money remains available. More than 70%, but I'm not going to harp on that just yet because we're going to come back to that. He, Brandon Johnson, dismissed the notion of using more American Rescue Plan funds for migrants. He said, I'm not using any more of that money for them. And I quote, so first of all, I'm going to spend all of that money. I can assure you that. And he was talking about the C-19 funds, the remaining $400 million. I'll read that again. Brandon Johnson said, so first of all, I'm going to spend all that money. I assure you that. He's going to spend that whole $400 million. And we're going to make sure that the communities that have been impacted the most by gross disinvestment, that those dollars reach those communities, Johnson said. Now, at this point, I believe it is close to $1 billion that in between the state and city, overall, close to $1 billion has been spent on Biden's migrant crisis in Chicago, right? Close to $1 billion. And to date so far, only $1 million that we've been able to track, only $1 million has been spent on these disinvested communities of color. Only 1 million. And that $1 million, as you all remember, because I covered it, was broken down between 4 different neighborhoods. So you have $400 million left in C-19 funds. Why you still have that much left is beyond me. But out of the $400 million, close to $1 billion has already been spent on Biden's migrants. Only 1 million was broken down between 4 communities to do God knows what. Right? But let's go back to the top again. Let me just read these blue portions. Johnson decided against committing another $70 million, saying the deal is not just about financial resources. And then he said, or I should say, he dismissed the notion of using ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan funds, for migrants. Now we fast forward to the current date, and let's see how all of that tough talking worked out. Since Bring Chicago Home, that initiative that he was going to use to fund the migrant crisis, failed. Let's see how that worked out. Is he still standing on his square concerning not spending any American Rescue Plan money? Is that what he's still doing? Or did he break? Did he fold? Did he run the city council asking for tens of millions of dollars, just like I said he would? Let's see.
Migrants coming to Chicago.
Let me rewind that back just a little bit. Also, there are 180 of you in the stream right now. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. That is extremely important for the growth of this channel.
The number of migrants coming to Chicago has slowed considerably. Only 5 people are currently awaiting placement in shelters, and no buses are expected to arrive this afternoon from the southern border. But today, the Johnson administration began holding closed-door meetings at City Hall to brief alderpersons about a plan to authorize another $70 million to care for the new arrivals.
I thought you weren't putting any more money down on it, Brandon. I thought you were standing tall on that. I guess not. I wonder what happened.
To care for the new arrivals. According to Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosa, who was briefed on the plan, the funds are needed as the city looks ahead to the Democratic National Convention in August.
Before I let this guy speak, let me put his face on the screen. Many of you may remember this thug. This thug, Carlos Ramirez Rosa, was the individual who put his hands allegedly, I assume that's what it looked like on the video, but allegedly that is right. Even though we all saw the video, allegedly, this thug put hands on an elderly city councilwoman who was also a black woman. He put hands on her in order to prevent her from being able to cast a vote during the time period when city council officials were attempting to put a referendum on the March 19th ballot to let the citizens of Chicago decide whether or not they wanted the city to remain a sanctuary city. He stood in front of the door, blocking that woman from coming in, and even put his hands on her. I assume, allegedly. Wink, wink, right? And it was Ray Lopez, another city councilman, who came to the rescue and said, "Hey, bro, get your hands off her. Are you crazy?" And let Immigrants in. Now, we all know how that worked out. They were able to successfully block the vote and yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to go down that road right now concerning the sanctuary city referendum. But my point is that this guy shouldn't even be in office anymore. And the only reason that he survived that ordeal is, number one, because none of these DNC news outlets covered it. MSNBC, CNN, none of it. None of the YouTube DNC outlets covered it, like Roland Martin. He didn't cover it either. The Breakfast Club didn't cover it. They would have for sure covered it if he was a Republican that did that. Then they would have covered it, and they would have been crying big tears about, oh my God, he put his hands on a black woman, and an elderly black woman at that. We can't believe it. But because he himself is a Democrat and they're pushing their illegal immigrant agenda, and he was pretty much at the time Brandon Johnson's right-hand man, nobody said anything about it. So I just wanted to refresh everybody's memory on who this thug is. Once again, Carlos Ramirez Rosa, this thug that, had he had been a Republican, had he had been a conservative and did what he did to that black woman, you would have heard about it in national news. But because he's a Democrat and he was Brandon Johnson's right-hand man, you only heard about it here on TD Media Group. That's why you should subscribe. Now let's get into what he's actually saying. Let's see what this thug has to say.
Convention in August.
We've received intel from the border that as we get closer to the DNC, Republicans are going to ramp up the number of buses that they're sending to the city of Chicago to embarrass President Biden and to embarrass the city of Chicago as we host the Democratic National Convention.
According to sources familiar with the plan, most of the money would come from...
I have to stop right there. When is the Democratic Party National Convention in Chicago? Let me look it up right now. Is it over the summer, if I'm not mistaken? Let me know in the live chat, and maybe, let me see. I should have had this up already, but let me pull this up. DNC, let me see, convention. When is this? When is this going to be? Why can't I find the date? I should have had this up already. When is this going to be? August. Okay. August 19th to August 22nd. So that's going to be over the summer when it's hot. My point for stopping to bring that up is this. Greg Abbott is not sending them up there. I for sure turned into the Greg Abbott defender on this channel whenever they push this narrative, right? That he's just sending people up there against their will. He's not sending anybody to Chicago against their will. He's not sending one to New York against their will. Biden's migrants are choosing to go to these places. And common sense and logic tells you, obviously, that once things warm up over the summer, more of Biden's migrants will be requesting to come to Chicago and New York once it heats up. They saw how crazy things was over the winter and how seemingly there were migrants outside in the cold and freezing and things like that. So yeah, they weren't coming up. But obviously, once again, common sense and logic tells you that once it heats up in Chicago, the buses will start flowing into the city because it's candy in Chicago. They're housing migrants by the thousands, literally over 500,000, placing them into nice apartment buildings all along the south and west side. Of course, once the weather clears up and it gets tolerable to be homeless, if that's the case for a little while before they get placed in their apartment building, Obviously, common sense and logic says that they're going to come to Chicago. So what he's doing right now, what he's telling right now is a whole lie. He did not get any intel stating that Greg Abbott is going to start sending a bunch of buses to Chicago because the convention center is coming over the summer. No, they were coming regardless. They were coming regardless because it's heating up and you're handing out all type of housing to illegal immigrants that you're not offering up to the citizen homeless population of Chicago. So he's a liar. This man is lying. Anyways, I digress. Let's carry on.
National Convention.
According to sources familiar with the plan, most of the money would come from a reserve fund set up for the migrants and the rest from rainy day funds. No other budgets would be reduced so as not to further alienate city council members already concerned about the amount of money being spent on migrants.
We've seen opposition even come from some of the mayor's progressive allies, and so that does complicate the politics.
Remember that he's having some issues with his own allies. Brandon Johnson is having issues with his own allies. And I'm going to come back to that when we go through the next news clip.
Politics.
In January, the mayor had committed to allocating the money in a joint agreement with the state and Cook County, but then backed out of the deal. The governor today appeared encouraged by the mayor's change of heart.
And for those who complain about the expenditure that's being made, let's be clear. First, this is just basic needs that people are getting. Nobody's getting any fancy, luxury.
The reason that I'm smiling is because in my head, I'm thinking to myself, if he said what he actually wanted to say, for those who are, going to complain, I don't care what you think. We're doing what we're going to do, and we're going to push this agenda on you all, whether you like it or not. Sorry for interrupting. Let JB Pritzker, the slime ball, finish his statement.
It's being made. Let's be clear. First,
but then backed out of the deal. The governor today appeared encouraged by the mayor's change of heart.
And for those who complain about the expenditure that's being made,
I really don't care what you think. So
let's be clear. First, this is just basic needs that people are getting. Nobody's getting any fancy, luxuries out of this.
Some aldermen still skeptical.
Where are the needs? What are the future needs? And how are we going to utilize these funds, taxpayers' dollars, in the correct way?
The aldermanic briefings will continue for the next couple of days. The mayor's office hoping to win enough support to bring the funding proposal before the full city council for a vote next Wednesday.
Now let's go into the next news clip. And as we're going into the next news clip, there are 258 of you in the stream right now. Please hit the like button if you have not already. And thank you very much.
Brandon Johnson is now ready to agree to a deal with the state and county. He is now getting ready to ask Chicago aldermen to approve $70 million more for the migrant crisis.
Aldermen will be briefed on the details later on this week. Political reporter Marianne Ahern was the first to report this development.
In early February, Governor Pritzker left City Hall after meeting with Tony Preckwinkle and Mayor Brandon Johnson to find a three-way funding deal for the migrant crisis. The state will be asking the General Assembly to approve $182 million. The county, $70 million. But days later, the mayor said no to the city's share of $70 million, despite initially agreeing. He defiantly would not explain why he backed out.
So you're making an assertion that I made a promise. Were you at that meeting?
This man is the master at not answering questions and talking in circles. Emperor Brandon Johnson.
Today, 2 months later, Chicago aldermen are being told the city will kick in its share, that's $70 million.
And the fact that the governor is willing to put up some money, as well as President Preckwinkle, I think it's only right that we have the ability to put up some funding as well.
It follows a troubling pattern where the mayor's office seems to not collaborate with us, the city council, and then does something, and then we have to clean it up on the back end.
Both.
Now, I want to stop right there because remember earlier, the thug, Carlos Ramirez Rosa, he was stating that Brandon Johnson is having some trouble with his allies. And what I would submit to you is that those allies in city council that he's having trouble with are the black ones. They're his black allies. That's who he's having trouble with because they're getting a hard time and having a hard time with their constituents, which are black, right? And the reason that that's very obvious, is that now in between these two news clips that we just watched, and this isn't finished yet, But in between the two news clips that we just watched, in the first news clip, you saw the thug, Carlos Ramirez Rosa, very much in favor. Like, yeah, we got to, we got to get the money. Let's get the money. Let's get the, the $70 million. We need that. Let's go. But then, though he wasn't black, you saw a white man questioning it, having his concerns about it, his doubts. I don't know. Right? Now, here we are in this clip. You have another Hispanic gentleman. What is his name again? His name is Gilbert Villages, I guess you can call it, right? Gilbert Villages, Hispanic man. Very much so ready to let the money fly. Yeah, let's get that 70 million going. And then once again, just like the news clip before, follow up, another Caucasian gentleman who's going, I don't know, this is getting ridiculous. We always have to clean up after this guy's mess. You're seeing the pattern in between two different news clips from two different news companies, ABC and NBC, where the Hispanic aldermen are all for it. The white aldermen are like, oh, Jesus Christ, again, I don't know about this one. Come on, we got to clean this guy's mess up every single time. How are we going to do it this time? Oh, my God. And then the black aldermen are nowhere to be seen. They're nowhere to be seen. They're not even talking to them because it's not a good idea to talk to them right now, because they're not really on the best of terms with Brandon Johnson right now, because they're hearing an earful from their constituents who are black, which they should be, because they sold them out. They sold them out to Biden's migrant crisis. So they should be hearing an earful. But I just wanted to go back to that when I said I was going to come back to it earlier concerning Carlos Ramirez Rosa, the thug, when he said that he's having trouble with some of his allies. He's talking about his black allies. That's who he's having trouble with. And that's why you don't even see them here speaking at all. But let's carry on.
Troubling pattern where the mayor's office seems to not collaborate with us in city council and then does something, and then we have to clean it up on the back end.
Both Alderman Conway and Villegas expect the mayor will be using COVID funds. The city, according to published reports, has used about 30% of the total $1.9 billion federal funds.
See, so I blocked out the word C19 because I'm still scared for my life to even say that word on this channel. But didn't our good friend Brandon Johnson say that he wasn't going to use those funds anymore? That was what he said back in February, right? He said that we're not using any more C19 funds. He said the rest of that money, the rest of that $400 million in C19 funds is going to go to historically disinvested communities, right? Which is assumed to be black and brown, whatever that even means. That's what it's assumed. But he's already gone back on his word. He's already gone back on what he said. He stated, and I don't have the news clip up now, but it was a news clip that I played here on one of the live streams, maybe a few months ago, where he explicitly stated the rest of that $400 million will be going to the city of Chicago. He explicitly stated that the rest of those funds will be going to the city of Chicago, to the citizens, to the disinvested communities, right? And communities across the city. And he's already gone back on that. And here we are. He's spending another, what did they say he's going to do? At least half of that $70 million is going to come out of C19 funds. And what's even more wild, what's even more crazy, I want to blow this up very quickly, is, and I've asked this question before, but I have to keep harping on this. How is it that these funds were doled out in 2021 and only 30% of $1.9 billion was spent? I talked about this in one of my news videos, the little pre-recorded videos that I do outside of the live streams. This really just explains just how crooked local government actually is when the people don't have control over who's in office and when they're asleep at the wheel. There's no way that only 30% of $1.9 billion of C-19 funds should have been spent. All of that should have been spent taking care of the needs of the citizens at that moment in time, or at least throughout the course of the period of time that they received it from 2021 up until now. They're just holding on to the money, reserving it, the same way that they were doing in Madison, Wisconsin, when they all of a sudden decided to release $700,000 in C-19 funds to take care of illegal immigrants over there. And from what I was told in the comment section from people that live in Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin isn't even a sanctuary city. Madison isn't even a sanctuary city. So from what I was told, at least via the comment section, the people over there are pretty upset about it. But what that leads me to believe, like I stated in that previous video about Madison, Wisconsin, when they issued out these C-19 funds that should have been spent on the citizens already, like what I stated then, this genuinely leads me to believe, if I may put my tinfoil hat on. I don't have a tinfoil hat, but I need to get a tinfoil hat. This genuinely leads me to believe, right? If I put my tinfoil hat on right now, that these C-19 funds that were handed out to these states and cities were issued out specifically for the purpose of funding the migrant crisis in said cities if need be. They were told to hold on it. In my opinion, I believe I assume, in my opinion, they were told, hold on to this money. Don't go crazy and start solving the issues of the city, and don't start fixing up the school system and your infrastructure and doing silly stuff like that. Don't put it towards initiatives that'll reduce crime and violence in your communities. Why would you do something ridiculous like that? Hold on to the money, because this migrant crisis is coming, and I'm not going to be able to bail you guys out the way you might think that I will. But what you will be able to do is tap into these C-19 funds that are left over. If I put my tinfoil hat on, that's what I'm starting to believe, because there is really no reason for any city at this point. Now, what is it, 3 years removed from receiving the funds? Why do so many cities still have so much C-19 money left over? It's completely ridiculous. It's ridiculous, if you ask me. But let's carry on. Oh, and also shout out to Saul. Shout out to Saul for always coming through like he always does with the contribution to today's stream. He said, if you defend Abbott one more time, the Texans are sending you a flag. if the Texans send me a flag, because I have a feeling that I'll be defending Greg Abbott for a long time to come. But if you guys send me a flag, I don't know if you're down there, Saul, but if the Texans send me a flag, I'll put it up behind me. And I'll put a hat on with the Texas flag on it too. But you guys got to send me one. So if you send me one, I'll put it up behind me, and I'll go a full Texan for you guys. Okay. But let's get back into the stream. Let's get back into it.
1.9.
Let me rewind that back just a little bit.
The city, according to published reports, has used about 30% of the total $1.9 billion federal funds.
I had drafted an ordinance that would allow for more city council oversight over ARPA funds. That, despite being supported by a majority of council, it was, of course, derailed to the Rules Committee.
So Brandon Johnson and his people, they don't want any oversight. This is also another issue that we run into numerous times over. So he proposed a bill that would create a situation in which they would have more oversight over the C-19 funds that are left over and how it's spent and where it's going. But of course, Emperor Brandon Johnson wants nothing to do with that. So it's been casted to the side. Let's hear that again.
An ordinance that would allow for more city council oversight over ARPA funds. That, despite being supported by a majority of council, it was, of course, derailed to the Rules Committee.
Aldermen will be briefed Wednesday and Thursday on the mayor agreeing to now, yes, kick in the $70 million for the migrant crisis. And since the 2024 budget was already approved, this will take a separate full council vote. Marianne Ahern, NBC 5 News.
And there you have it, folks. There you have it. Brandon Johnson going back on his word in every way, shape, form, and fashion. said he wasn't going to spend any more money on the migrant crisis. I told you all that what he's waiting for is to see if the Bring Chicago Home initiative would pass so that he can use that money to fund the migrant crisis. It didn't pass. So just like I stated, if it doesn't pass, he'll be running the city council. And that is exactly what he did. He ran the city council looking for some more money, tens of millions of dollars for illegal immigrants, but not for the citizens, because you had to wait on a bill that didn't pass. And now your homeless will still remain homeless while Biden's migrants will be housed. That's what's happening here right now. That's what's happening here. And I want to read Rashawn Waiter's comment before I leave, because I agree with you. I agree with you 100%, Rashawn. Rashawn said when he leaves office, Brandon Johnson, that is, he's going to be filthy rich. He doesn't care about reelection. I 100% agree with you on that. I 100% agree with you on that. Brandon Johnson knew the job that he signed up for. He understood what the mission was, and he is fulfilling it outright. He is fulfilling it outright without a care in the world. He can care less about the citizens of Chicago. He can care less about anybody and what anyone has to say concerning him. That's why he has such a smug attitude whenever he does these interviews. This is something that we've spoken on numerous times on this channel as well. Every time he does an interview, he's so arrogant, so smug, blatantly won't answer a question. You ask him anything, ask him any question, and he would just blatantly give you a completely different answer that has nothing to do with nothing. The guy doesn't care because him and his family is going to be taken care of, because he's doing his job. And to be honest, despite the fact that we don't like it, he's doing it well. He's doing it well. And this also lends to the fact of what I've been saying for the past at least maybe month and a half now, as it pertains to holding elected officials accountable. People like to talk about that. Oh, we got to hold these politicians accountable. You cannot hold a politician accountable once he's in office. When he's in office, it's too late. Once he is in office, he or she is going to do what they want to do. The only way you hold a politician accountable is by making sure that said politician doesn't get in office who doesn't deserve to be there, like a Joe Biden, right? That's the only way you hold them accountable. You hold them accountable by making sure they're not there to be held accountable, because once they're in office, it's too late. And the reality is, concerning Brandon Johnson, like Rashawn said, hey man, this guy's set already. He's doing his job. He's doing it well. And he doesn't care what you or any of us think. That's why I always refer to him as Emperor Brandon Johnson, or sometimes King Brandon Johnson, because the guy does what he wants to do and he really doesn't care. And with all that being said, that does it for today's stream. I wasn't supposed to stream tonight. I told you guys I was going to come back tomorrow, but I couldn't let the Brandon Johnson news pass. I couldn't let this pass by. But I want to thank you all for joining me today. Shout out to Saul for showing love on the stream, showing love as you always do, brother. Thank you, Saul. Hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel. Share this video out on your social media platforms. And until the next show, maybe tomorrow, for sure Friday night, peace and have a great afternoon, or a great evening, I should say, and a safe one. Good night.